A video of Alex Jones is going viral. In this video, he accurately predicts there would be a massive war in February. So this is from October of last year. He recorded this video. And he says that this is the buildup, just like pre-World War I, pre-World War II. Right now, we are being inundated with psychotic propaganda. It's everywhere. For me, it's really, really frustrating. I'm quite annoyed by it. I don't mind feel-good stories, trying to get people's hopes up and inspire them and boost morale, especially in times of great conflict. But what I can't stand is low-tier garbage manipulation and propaganda. And that's a lot of what we're getting. They tell us that Alex Jones is a madman. I think it's fair to say a lot of people point out when you throw a whole bucket of spaghetti at the wall, some of the things will stick. But I think it's kind of worrying that Alex Jones said this in October of last year. I wonder what else the man knows, and I wonder who told him this. I want to play for you this clip, and then I want to talk to you about information manipulation, how it pertains to the banning and censorship of Alex Jones, and how it pertains to how they're trying to manipulate you right now into supporting war. Check out this clip. This is amazing stuff.
But we're looking at a giant war in February right now. Currently, that's the projections with the top people on the earth who claim they're not with the New World Order Combine. Is war in February. And this is the type of time, like right before World War I, right before World War II, when everything kicks off.
I have questions. Who told Alex Jones that there would be a war, a big war in February? The war was initiated by Vladimir Putin. Is there someone who knows what Putin's plans are that told Alex Jones, and Alex Jones told the military or didn't say anything? I don't know. I will say we were getting inundated with news stories that Russia was going to invade, that it was imminent, and Russia did invade. Even Russia says Russia invaded. But let me tell you about propaganda. Right now, the most annoying thing to me is if you go to Reddit and just go to Reddit. I wake up, I read Reddit and I understand Reddit is basically mostly propaganda. But you have a whole bunch of posts. Let me show you one that I think is really interesting. A message as simple as 2 bricks, it reads, from r/Lego. And it is Legos pushed together in the colors of the Ukrainian flag. There are endless stories about Ukraine. Look at this. Trump, who was impeached for withholding nearly $400 in military aid from Ukraine, said this deadly Ukraine situation would have never happened if he were in office. It is anti-Trump propaganda. It is anti-Russia propaganda. Now, look, I don't like Vladimir Putin. I think the dude's off his rocker for the most part. I think he's got some valid points, but I think invading Ukraine is insane. I understand he has criticisms about what's been going on in Ukraine, and you can argue the U.S. and NATO are not playing fair when it comes to negotiating. The way I see it, Russia is powerful. Russia wants to negotiate, and they want things. They want to expand. Vladimir Putin wants to bring back the power of Russia. It ain't going to happen. The U.S. and NATO are more powerful. And so Russia keeps getting pushed down and pushed down. So what does he do? He buddies up with China. China wants Taiwan, much the same. The U.S. does not have the power it once had. So propaganda is pouring out. Vladimir Putin knows this and sees an opportunity. China sees an opportunity. I think war is wrong. But Vladimir Putin's not going to sit back and let the U.S. and NATO bully him. And what's funny is, Cenk Uygur had this tweet. We covered it yesterday where he's like, the right likes Vladimir Putin because he's a white guy, and it's ridiculous because Biden's a white guy too. And then he posts this story about Tucker Carlson, and he says, Cenk was right, because Tucker accurately points out the perspective of Russia. Let me tell you, in a viral video, Joe Biden is bragging that he manipulated the Ukrainian political administration, the presidency, the firing of a prosecutor by threatening to withhold aid. He's on video saying it. So I can't stand the propaganda. Now, there's probably some context there. You can argue that Joe Biden's position is right or Joe Biden's position was wrong. The argument from the establishment is that the prosecutor was not doing his job. But when you take a look at independent reporting and investigation, Victor Shokin, the prosecutor who got fired by Joe Biden, was doing his job. And that involved investigating Burisma, where his son worked. Now, I'll tell you what was really happening. The U.S. is using subversive and underhanded tactics to gain favor in Ukraine and gain control, so that Ukraine sides with the EU and NATO. I don't blame the U.S. for wanting to expand its sphere of influence. That's what countries do. Vladimir Putin did not want that and refused to stand for it. When Vladimir Putin realized he lost, and it's been going on for years, what happens? He invades. Now, why is it that Vladimir Putin did not invade Ukraine while Trump was president? Reportedly, and take it or not, this could be propaganda as well, Trump threatened Putin that he would bomb Moscow. And Putin said, no way. And then Trump was like, yes. I don't know if that's true. I think Trump was saying something like that. But it sounds like Trump. And it sounds like everything they claimed about Trump, that he was a psychotic fascist. Okay, well, Ukraine didn't get invaded by Russia. All of this goes back to U.S. interests with natural gas and getting energy into Europe. And I've talked about it quite some time. The Qatar-Turkey pipeline, Syria, it all boils down to this. And they need propaganda and they need censorship to make sure their narrative persists, which brings me back to our good friend, Alex Jones. I've had Alex on the show before. I think he's a good dude. I think he gets a lot of things wrong. I think he believes some weird, crazy stuff. But there's a reason why they had to censor him, and it's this. Alex Jones actually came out on his show and said last October there would be war in February. He was right. That shatters the narrative. It pierces through. I'm not saying Alex Jones represents the bastion of real journalism or great historical journalism. The fact is, the guy's a pundit. He gets things right, and he slashes through the establishment narrative. And that's a big issue for the establishment. That on the internet, people were able to produce content that resulted in a Donald Trump presidency. I wonder about Ron DeSantis. I really do. Too good to be true. A lot of people are saying he's better than Trump, and I think he is. And there's a lot of people who fear that he's just going to be another establishment player who's trying to pander to the populist right to try and recapture that energy and get it back into the fold. Maybe. Maybe Russia really is sowing propaganda and they're propping up, anti-establishment voices. I mean, RT literally hires activists. But when I visited RT offices in Sputnik, it's a bunch of Democrats. But I guess a lot of these people were pro-Black Lives Matter and were anti-establishment. I suppose the Democrats and the establishment thought they could capture and wield that power of BLM. I don't know. Let me tell you about propaganda and censorship. They needed to shut down Alex Jones because of things like this. And now we have this story from the Daily Mail. Hacking Collective Anonymous declares cyber war against Vladimir Putin's government before announcing they have taken down website of Kremlin-backed TV channel RT. I call BS. Anonymous, I don't buy it. I really don't. And it's because anonymous literally means what it means. Anonymous. It means a random person did this or a random group did this. And it's not a hacking collective. That's always been a big mistake in the media. How do I know? I know a lot of people that were involved with anonymous hacktivism. And you go to these hacker spaces and you ask them, what is anonymous? And they'll be like, it means literally what it means. It's like saying John Doe or Jane Doe. It's not a group. It's not a collective. When someone says, sends you a letter and it says, I love you, signed anonymous, it's not a group of secret individuals wearing masks who sent you that letter. It's a single person who didn't put their name. I'll tell you what I think this is. Shutting down RT. Yeah, RT's actually down. You try to go to RT and this is what you get. The webpage at RT, Russia, Kremlin presents demands Kiev has been temporarily moved or, permanently taken down. You Google search RT News, you can still see the headlines. You can see a lot of the stories, some of which aren't coming out. Here's one. Russia has no plans to take over Ukraine. Putin. Yeah, I'm going to call BS on that completely. But of course, that's the Russian perspective. Anonymous declares war on Russia. You have Russia ready to negotiate with Kremlin, but RT is down. I cannot go there and read this. Why would the hacking collective Anonymous favor censorship? Because they're establishment stooges who believe in censorship? Yeah. Here's my bet. You want to ask me what I think's going on? Let's call this a letter of marque. I said this is exactly what would happen. I've talked about this for years. Back in the days of old, the colonial era, and war in Europe and the colonies, there was such a thing called a letter of marque, where privateers, privately owned warships, in fact, oftentimes pirates, would be granted a signed letter of marque from the crown of whatever country they would represent. The King of England would say, I want you to go and destroy French ships. And here is a letter of marque. If you are captured by our side, present this letter, you'll carry on your way. Then, when these privateers or corsairs would attack the French ships, the British crown would say, oh, heavens, it's just pirates. Shake our fists at those pirates. We would never attack you, France. Because they didn't want overt declarations of war. This is what I think is happening now. The U.S. presented plans to Joe Biden about shutting down the media from Russia, their internet and their trains, and then the next day it happens? It's exactly what I said was going to happen. It would be a third party doing this action, and then the U.S. would disavow and be like, oh, it's the hackers. Oof. We have nothing to do with it. Shouldn't we be able to read what Russia has to say? Shouldn't we, a free people, be allowed to see what Russia is talking about? The censors think not. Any free people has a right to read news from other countries. We talk about North Korea shutting down the internet. We talk about Turkey shutting down the internet. We condemn it. We talk about how people in China don't know anything about Tiananmen Square. Shouldn't people in the United States who claim to support these values be able to read RT? Yes, and Sputnik. So who are these hacker anonymous hackers who are just absolutely in support of the U.S. establishment? Of course, it's possible. There actually are hackers who don't like that Vladimir Putin is lying and pushing propaganda. But it's psychotic. You know why? I'll tell you why it's psychotic. Anonymous hackers. I hung out a great deal with hackers growing up. I had a lot of friends who were deeply involved with hacktivism. There was an interesting thing that happened in the early 2010s with the Arab Spring. Anonymous would engage in something called Operation Black Fax. Black Fax is when they would spam fax machines in a target country so that they would all print out just full black sheets of paper. The goal was to run their machines dry and cause damage to some infrastructure. There's a group called Telecomics. They did an operation called White Fax. They actually asked Anonymous to stop doing this. What they would do with their fax attack is to send vital information to civilians on how to survive, how to keep the lines of communication flowing. As much as they, Anonymous and Telecomics, were aligned in opposition to despots in these regimes, Anonymous was often trying to jam up and shut down communications through distributed denial of service attacks and things like Operation Black Fax, whereas Telecomics was trying to create lines of communication so that people could share information and let us know what's happening. I actually know a lot of people who are involved in the IRC, the chats for Telecomics, and they upheld values of free speech and data love, as it were. Anonymous seems to be more chaotic and destructive. And that's fine in a certain sense, not all bad. If there really are hackers who are going up against Putin, I get it. I really do. Don't like the guy. I think what he's doing is wrong. Absolutely. Regardless of the politics around why he decided he should do it. If you lose, you lose. Killing people and storming in is just wrong. Now, I wonder, though, do we have the appropriate perspective from Russia on what they're doing? Do we understand why they're doing it? Perhaps we can say that Vladimir Putin is a madman who wants to take more than Ukraine. Certainly, there are news reports to suggest just that he will not be satisfied with Ukraine, that he wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. I think that's actually true to a certain degree. I don't know how insane the man is. He's nearing 70 years old. But the report was that everything was just, he's going to, from the Russian side, just move in to the eastern region, the Donbass region, to secure the independent states. And then what happened? Full-scale invasion. Sorry, I don't think Putin is telling the truth. I think that's very clear. But there is still a way, my friends, to view Russia today, if you want to get that perspective from Russia, to break through the propaganda. You go to actualidad.rt.com. I do think it's fascinating that rt.com is down, but a subdomain is up. It is what it is. This is the Spanish language version of RT, and you need only then run it through a Google Translate, and you can see what they're saying. Truth be told, it's not too dissimilar to what we're hearing. Russia closes airspace to British aircraft. That's interesting. We often hear that we've heard the story about Aeroflot banning Russian aircraft, but Russia's done the same. Putin is ready to send a Russian delegation to Minsk to negotiate with Ukrainian side. Zelensky proposes to Putin to sit at the negotiating table to prevent the death of people. What is happening after the start of Russia's military operation in Ukraine? They don't call it an invasion. They call it a Russian military operation. Then we have this story that I think is interesting. This is what Russia is telling its people. Lavrov, no one is going to occupy Ukraine. The objectives of the operation are demilitarization and denazification. It is true that there are white supremacist groups in Ukraine. Vice covered it. Guardian covered it. Certainly, I think Putin is exploiting this to claim, see, look, America, we're going after the Nazis. No, I think Vladimir Putin doesn't like that he's lost the influence war in Ukraine, so he's decided, I'm not going to play anymore. I'm taking it by force. I'm not a fan. If you lose, you lose. War is not the answer. Russia has been conducting a military operation in Ukraine since early Thursday morning, and I'll give you the gist of what they're saying because, we had to break through the propaganda to get to this point. I don't think they're telling the truth. Again, I'll say it, but they certainly have their perspective. Lavrov says, do the democracies that you support accept the prohibition of a language spoken by a large number of people and education in that language? He's talking about in the Donbass region, saying that the people who live there aren't allowed to speak Russian, or at least that's what I believe he's trying to convey. He says that Kiev is carrying out a genocide in the Donbass region and criticized Ukraine's language policy, which he says violates the rights of Russian-speaking Ukrainians. After a reply from a correspondent who asked him not to use euphemisms and maintained that it is not a special military operation, but rather a large-scale military conquest, Lavrov asserted no one is going to occupy Ukraine. Then, gee, good sir, what are you doing right now? The idea is that because they're going to be leaving at a certain point, it's not an occupation. No, you're going in with military force. You're taking over different areas of the country. Sounds to me like you'll occupy it, if only for a little bit. So there is no euphemism. We want the Ukrainian people to be able to define the future. The objectives of the operation were openly declared demilitarization and denazification. Now, I got to be honest. This is propaganda from Russia. It's exactly what RT is. It's RT's state media. But you expect me to believe the propaganda coming out of the West? No, it's all trash. I have talked to enough people. I have read enough. And I think I have a general understanding of what's happening. I understand why Vladimir Putin is mad and why he wants to move in. I'm not entirely convinced he's going to try and conquer all of Eastern Europe and reform the Soviet Union. But this is a guy who's losing, and he decided to use military force to win. A lot of stories are coming out. Let me show you this one. Who is the ghost of Kiev? Badass Ukrainian pilot hailed for shooting down 6 Russian jets. Feel-good stories are dominating social media. The ghost of Kiev. It's a cool story. It's a fighter pilot who's reportedly been flying around and he downed 6 aircraft. They're saying the first ace fighter pilot since World War II. And how do I know any of that is true? It's just a picture of a fighter jet. Propaganda. Now, it's cool stories. It may be true. Get us some verification. But you know what you got to watch out for? Of course, the West will come out with all of these feel-good stories. Here's another one. Snake Island. Soldiers' defiant last words as Russian warships target Snake Island. Apparently, a Russian warship came out and said, this is a military warship. This is a Russian military warship. I suggest you lay down your weapons and surrender to avoid bloodshed and needless casualties. Otherwise, you will be bombed. A Ukrainian soldier's response, Russian warship, go F yourself. Those are the final known words heard from the island. All 13 Ukrainian defenders were killed in a Russian bombardment Thursday. All border guards died heroically but did not give up. They will be awarded the title of Hero of Ukraine posthumously, Zelensky said. Now, these stories could be true for sure. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying be aware that Russia is going to come out with their stories. The West will come out with their stories. You're going to see more and more videos from the West showing people cheering in the streets. There's a video of a woman going up to a Russian soldier and saying, put sunflower seeds in your pocket so when you die, flowers will bloom. And everyone's like, yeah. Listen, I don't mind these stories. I don't mind people trying to rally against a Russian invasion. I totally get it. What I want is accurate information as to what's happening. This is propaganda. Look for it. Understand it. So you can try and better understand why the fighting is happening. I don't like Russia. I don't like what they've done. I don't like what they're doing. I don't like them. They're siding with China. I certainly understand they have their grievances. I get it. They've lost this one. Going into Ukraine is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. It's destructive and it's infuriating. But you got to understand, if you want to have an accurate view of the world, you need to understand shutting down news, publishing endless propaganda infuriates me. More so than anything. You know what makes me mad, though, is war, to be completely honest. I get it. I really, really do. But it's just so annoying to see these war hawk warmongers going on social media and screaming that we should be going to war. Is Ukraine our territory? No. So when the U.S. comes out with plans for direct attacks on Russian infrastructure, I say, that's war. That's going to lead us to World War III, you nuts? Russia's threatening action against the West if they interfere. You've got NATO and U.S. Forces saying boot them from SWIFT, the international payment system. Or how about we do this? We back off. See, here's the issue. The U.S. used influence campaigns to gain control of the Ukrainian government. Joe Biden bragged about doing it. They said, here's $1 billion, do as we tell you, and put in the people we want. And they said, okay. There was the revolution, the coup d'etat, whichever side you want to believe, in 2014 that ousted the actual president from Ukraine. Russia then says, you're going to play dirty games, I'm going in. And the U.S. says, you can't go in, that's against the rules. That's war. I prefer the United States, especially because I live here, but war is war, man. So if you like the luxuries you have, side with the U.S., regardless. If you don't mind giving up luxuries because you think war is bad, then stand up for what you think is right and condemn the war. But the reality is, what Joe Biden is doing, with war in Ukraine, it's going to greatly benefit people in Europe and the EU. But you know what? You want me to come to your defense? It ain't going to happen. Because the Biden administration is pulling CBP officers off the southern border of Ukraine. Why? I'm sorry, off the southern border of the U.S. for Ukraine. Our border guards are being taken from our border, which is completely destroyed, and they're being sent to Poland for this war effort. Don't buy the propaganda. Decide for yourself what matters. The Democratic establishment are crackpot lunatics, and they will not have my support. The Ukrainian people will, and Putin is wrong. Easy enough to say. Biden is a piece of trash. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.